All right, with the implementation plan for Part 11 laid out in front of us, let's go ahead and jump over here to Visual Studio Express and get busy. Logan, let's go ahead and start out with our fields in the game class.
All right, well, here we are in the game class. So I'm going to go back up to the top, back to our field section, and I'm going to jump in right below lives and drop down a comment for score.
Okay, we'll start out with score being the first one, because that makes sense.
All right, we'll put in the private integer for score to hold the current score. Then we need to look at the rest of the fields that are the base of the scoring system, and that begins with the initial score value. That's going to be a constant field of type integer, and we'll call this initial score value. And we'll set that to a value of 10.
Okay.
Next we have the cell death penalty. I'm going to make this an internal field because we need to access this penalty as though it were global to game.
Okay.
But I want to keep it restricted just to this assembly. So I'll make it an internal constant, which we'll call cell death penalty. And we'll set that to a value of 2.
Okay.
Alright, so one last field, and that is the current value for each cell's score worth. This is also going to be internal because we need to access it once again from cell, because this is the value that gets decremented if a cell dies. This will be internal static integer for
the current score value.
Current score value. So this will be the ongoing score. It gets decremented, and it's also used to increment the score if a cell is saved.
All right, let's go ahead and jump on down to, let's do begin game first. We know when a game begins, we need to make sure our score is at 0.
Right, just like lives and level. So if we scroll down to the very bottom of the game, we have our gameplay methods. Inside of this, here's begin game. So let's make sure that upon beginning the game, that the score is always reset to a value of 0.
Okay. Now down in begin level, let's go ahead and initialize what our current score value is worth, depending on what level you're in.
Okay. So here we have begin level. I'm going to jump down to the very bottom of that method so that we can set the current score value. And I want to set that up based on the initial score times level. So we can take a look at our initial score field, multiply that by the current level, and we should get a current score value for the beginning of the level.
Yeah, so when we start off with initial score value, which is always 1, and we're at level, 10, and we're at level 1, that means our current score value for the first level will be 10 points per cell unless the cell can start dying. Or dies. Yeah, there we go. So now that we have that in place, let's go ahead and go back up to the update section and find where we left that comment about it's a good place to add score.
All right, back up to update. We should have the
there it was.
playing section. Here's the cell section where we're saving a cell, and we wrote down a note saying that, okay, here's where we want to apply score.
And this is where we'll simply say this.score plus equals current score value. Easy enough. All right, so now that we are adding to our score when we save cells, let's make sure that we hurt that current score value each time a cell dies. So we're going to need to jump over into our cell class and go down into the update section to where a cell actually dies.
All right, so here we have the update method, and then the check to see if that cell has just died. If it has, we need to decrement the current score value. Now, of course, current score value is in game 1, so I'll say game1.current score value minus equals game1.cell-death-penalty. And that will take away the 2 points for every cell that dies.
Excellent. Okay, so that gets everything in place, but we don't really have a means of seeing it working yet. So let's go ahead and get our HUD put together.
All right, so to do that, I'm going to jump back to game, and then I'm going to scroll down to the drawing code. And this is actually where we still have that line that we had used to test the cell count when we were trying to debug level changing.
Yeah.
And since this is going to be rather similar...
As a matter of fact, go ahead and run it real quick, just to show them as a quick reminder.
This is a reminder.
Upper left-hand corner.
We have this value that's 2 to represent the cell count. And I was going to erase this line, but looking at it, I'm just going to end up retyping the entire thing almost. So I'm going to leave it in place, but change what it actually says. Since we're not worried about the cell count anymore, we instead want to change this over to the 3 elements of the HUD, the score, the value, and the lives. So this line will be that first line for score.
Okay.
And let me put that in quotes. Now the score is going to be the current, or this...
Yeah, dot score.
Score. And the positioning, let me snug that up to the left side a little bit more. So I'm going to drop the size down to 4, and I'll align it to the very top of the screen.
Okay.
And that looks good for the score line. So for the following 2 lines, I'll simply copy and paste this line twice so that we can have a line for the value, the cell's score worth, and the lives. So that will stand for lives remaining. Now value is of course given by the current score value,
yep.
And lives will be given by this dot lives. So we look at that lives field.
Wait, that's level.
Oh, whoops. That would have been funny. Why aren't lives going down? Yes, we want to get the lives field. And then one last thing is to make sure that we put these each on subsequent lines, so we move each line down. I'm going to move them each down about 20 pixels. So
okay.
1 to 20, then to about 40.
All right. So now we should have something in place that is going to let us test out the scoring system, and we'll be able to watch our lives get decremented and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and build, make sure everything builds smoothly, and it does. So let's launch it. Again, very simple HUD, but it gets the job done. So there we go. We start out with a score of 0, but our value is at 10. And we just, okay, so here we are, value of 20, a cell dies, 18, good, 16, good, 14, good, saved 1, we went up to 24. For anyone that might be worried about, well, what happens if our value drops to negative? Because then you're not going to want to save any cells. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. If you do the math here, you'll never end up in a situation where we could go negative with our value because of what the current score always starts off at the level, at. There's enough points that you can take away from it if all of your cells die where you're not going to go negative.
Right. We've got basically the penalty is set low enough where due to the given number of cells, we can never have a penalty, an accumulated penalty that would go higher than the overall number of
That's right.
points.
We got one more thing to test too. Let's go ahead and show them lives ticking away. So 3, 2, 1, and here comes game over. And
0.
Game over.
So
for
lives
0.
are 0, game over. Now there's one last thing to test, and that is to make sure that the score gets reset. Now I'm sure that'll work because we would just put that line in. But yes, on game restart, we have the score reset to 0 because this begins an entirely new game.
Fantastic. All right, so that really does wrap up everything we wanted to accomplish here in Part 11 for the score and the HUD system. And at this point, if you really think about it, Precision is a fully playable game. Okay. Now, of course, we are missing our time power-up that we requested in the requirements section for this game. But outside of that, we do now have a casual 2D game.
Right, all the
2D action game.
All the elements of gameplay are done. We've got different states. All states are accounted for. Many of those states represent screens. All of the screens handle input and progress properly.
Mm-hmm.
The game itself is set up with lives that allow you a few times that you can die and continue. But if you run out of those lives, the game can end. And even after ending, it can go all the way back to the beginning and restart.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the gameplay is there. The game is fully playable.
So at this point, we can now take our attention off of the core of Precision and start looking at creating this add-on, which is going to be the power-up class, which we'll be able to then extend into a time power-up that we can then sprinkle throughout the board as we need them. So really, that is going to wrap up this section. Thanks a lot.